This is a cross-platform cache. It's in the cloud, and its purpose is to allow platforms that don't normally talk to each other to exchange data easily. For the demo, I'm going to be using CodePen, which allows me to write code and see it execute immediately. Done a little bit of setup, just talk you through that for a moment. I'll be displaying results quite a bit. Instead of showing them on the console, I'm going to show them on the bottom part of the screen here, and I'm just doing that with a little function that I've written over here, just to quickly show you how that works. We just pass it some kind of a label, and then we give it some data, and it's going to show itself like that. The other things I've enabled for this demo, Babel, so I can use ES6, and I've included some CSS just to make the display look a bit nicer. But the main thing is that we've got the FX client. It is available in npm as well if you develop using the package manager. So let's get rid of this thing. So we'll just use a shortcut for the FX namespace. So it has a ping method, and the API is completely asynchronous and it returns promises. So to be able to see the result, we need a then. So we're using that function I showed you at the beginning to show the result. The responses that come back from the API are always in the same format. You've got a data property, and you've got various other properties. In this case, we'll want to look at the value one to see what ping's telling us. And of course, we'll have to execute this function, so let's just get that going. So that's the result that comes back from a ping. Obviously it's a pong. So now let's look a little bit more into what the format of this response data property is. So we'll ask for some info on the API, and this time we get back this object here. So the usual format is it's got an OK property. You can test for it being true to see if it worked. Code, which is kind of like an HTTP code, and then some content. In this case, we got the info, the version number, and so on. Of course, the main thing about Ephemeral Exchange, it's about writing data to a store and reading it back. So to be able to do that, you need to get some access keys. The way that FX works is through access keys as opposed to authentication. So there's several kinds of access keys. Every one of them can be created by the API, but to be able to do that, you need a boss key to show that you're able to do it and to assign it to a particular account. All data is held within an account. So let's go over to the console. So this is where you can set up accounts. You can set up quite a few accounts under your username, and within an account you can create what's called a boss key, and a boss key is the only kind of key that's allowed to create access keys. It can't read or write data. All it can do is to create access keys, and a boss key belongs to an account. So if you wanted to disable a boss key, you could delete it, or you could just simply disable or delete the account. So let's take that key, we'll use it. Now there's three different kinds of access keys we can create. One is a writer, which allows you to write new items to a store. An updater allows you to update an item that you've previously been allowed to access. And a reader is one that's allowed to read an item that you've previously been allowed to read. So to start with, we're going to create a writer key, which we need to write something in the first place. So to do that, we need a boss key, which we just picked up from the console, and we need to tell it which kind of key to create. And as usual, it's asynchronous, so we need a then to see what the result looks like. And here's the complete response from creating a key. So the thing that's of interest is this keys array, which will contain writer keys that we've asked it to create. You can do multiple ones at the same time. Just ask for one. The other thing that's of interest here is the expiry time. So this is saying this key is going to be valid until that particular time. So now that we have a writer key, we can start writing some data to the store. To be able to write data, then we need obviously the data we're going to write. This could be an object or anything you like. And here we're taking the key that was created in the previous step. So we're going to use that writer key to be able to write something to the store. So then we can see if it worked okay. And there's the response you get from a successful write. So here you've got a lifetime. This is telling you how long this data item is going to live for. So that's 3,600 seconds. And of course you're going to want to read that back. So to be able to read something, you need the ID of the thing you want to read, along with a key that's allowed to read from it. So the writer key can of course also read anything that it's been responsible for writing. So let's look at the previous result to see where we're picking that out from. So the ID is this, that's the data ID, and the writer has been passed back to us as well, so we can just use that. So here's the reading of it, and this is what a successful read looks like. Again, we get back the key that we read it with. We get back a confirmation that it was okay, a repetition of the ID that we just read, which account it belongs to, and various other things. But of course the thing we're most interested in is the value, which is this here. So now we'll remove that. So to be able to remove an item, you have to use the key that wrote it, and we've been using the same one all the way through. So this writer key is passed through, and been used as a reader key. So that's what we're going to use to delete it with. And finally, we'll just check the result, what successful delete looks like. Here we go. It was good. It worked fine. And the code we get back from that is a 204, which is the HTTP code for successful deletion. So that's the basic operations. What you want to be able to do here is to share data with other people or other systems. And you won't really want to be giving your writer key to someone. Rather, you'll want to be giving them a reader or an updater key that they can use to update an item or to read it. So let's go ahead and do that. But first of all, we'll not do any of these things anymore. We'll comment those out. Now, we could use generate key for each of the types of keys that are available, but in fact, EFX has got a handy method, make keys, that makes one of each. So we'll just use that. So from previously, we learned that you can write an item to store by passing some data along with the writer key. So let's see what the result of that comes out like. But if I wanted someone to be able to read that item, for example, this item here, then I wouldn't necessarily want to give him my writer key, which is here. Rather, I'd want to give him a reader or an updater key. So let's start by giving access to a reader key to this item that we've just written. So the write method takes a few other arguments. One is whether you use get or post to write the thing with, because if you're writing from a system that might not be able to post, for example, you can use get to write things as well. And then you've got this additional parameters, one of which is any reader keys that are allowed to read it. Another one would be updaters. So this would be an array of keys that would be able to read it. In this case, we're only allowing one, which is the reader we generated back up here. So this will still work. I'll still be able to use the writer key to read stuff with, but I'll also be able to use a reader keys. So now instead of reading it with the writer key, which is what we did in the previous example, now I'm reading it with this key here that has been given permission to read it. One of the handy things that it does when you use the make keys method is it stores these keys so you can retrieve them later. So I'm going to do that now to try and access the same item with the updater key, which hasn't been authorized to read it, so it should fail. So here we are reading that item, and we're using this get keys function of EFX to find out what the latest keys that were generated by make keys were, and we're taking the updater version. So we're now trying to read the cache using a key that's not authorized to do so. So that one should fail. Let's see what the result was. And now we have an OK false, that's what we expect. And we've got a code of 403, which means you're not allowed to read this key. So if we went back up here, and this time instead we created an item that allowed the updater key to read it as well. So we've done that there. Let's check the result. And here it is, it's happy now. So that's how you allow other keys to be able to access something that you've created. But before I do, let's just talk about how you would pass these keys to someone else. There is something called an alias, which is a way of giving a consistent name to a data item, but we'll cover that in a more advanced video. So you would have to pass the ID of the item that you'd want to share, but someone might have a consistent updater or reader key that they always use to be able to access data that you give them. So to simulate that, we're going to copy a couple of these now and stop creating them all the time. Let's just copy this whole lot here. Now EFX has just like it had a get keys for getting the most recent keys that have been used, it's also got a set keys for setting them. So we're going to consistently use these keys from now on in the demo rather than creating new ones each time. So we don't need this anymore. We can just use get keys here, and of course here and here. So now we're consistently using these saved keys rather than creating new ones each time. So in this case, we pass, if we want to share this data with someone to allow them to, for example, read it, then we pass them the data ID that we created for the item that we wanted them to be able to have access to. We'd give them access by allowing, for example, the reader key that we shared with them. So in a later video, we'll cover some of the more advanced topics, such as locking items, how to use aliases to build consistent workflows, and how to use push notification. For the meantime, you can find out more about this here. You saw the GitHub address. It can be found in these places as well, and I'll put them in the notes on the video. And that demo that we just went through is available on CodePen. You can just pick it up here.